and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. Hamas hands over the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages. The group say the remains include 3 members of the Bibas family and alleges they were killed in an Israeli airstrike in November of 2023. Meanwhile, Israeli forces report the killing of 3 Palestinian militants in the occupied West Bank, heightening tensions in the region. US President Donald Trump labels Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator and calls for elections in Ukraine, drawing rebuke from other world leaders. This comes while Zelensky accuses the US president of falling for Russian disinformation. Meanwhile, a US envoy has arrived in Kiev as Russian airstrikes cut power to nearly 160,000 residents in Odessa. Israel confirms it has carried out airstrikes in southern Lebanon despite prior withdrawal plans. 1 person has been killed in the latest Israeli strike, increasing concerns of further cross-border hostilities. Former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol stands trial on insurrection charges, facing the possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty. His lawyer argues that martial law was imposed to stop dictatorship as legal proceedings get underway. Brazil's former Conservative President Jair Bolsonaro has now accused the ruling party of an authoritarian regime, which is coercing against accusations against him. This comes after he was charged with orchestrating a coup bid. The 5 charges against him, the accused, include the crimes of a coup d'état, the attempt to violently abolish the democratic rule of law, and armed criminal organization. If found guilty, Bolsonaro could face up to 40 years in prison. According to the investigators, the alleged coup plan failed because Brazil's top military leaders did not support it. Bolsonaro is described in the indictment as the head of a criminal organization, which attempted to prevent in a coordinated manner the result of the 2022 presidential elections from being fulfilled. The final attempt to stop Lula da Silva from taking power was an attack by Bolsonaro supporters on the presidential palace, Congress and Supreme Court in Brasilia on January the 8th, 2023. In June 2023, Bolsonaro was also disqualified from running for office until 2030 after making unsubstantiated claims that the electoral system was unreliable. For more on this, we are joined by Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist located here in New Delhi, and we're also joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Middle East affairs expert located in Singapore. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. I want to kickstart this with input from Gautam Mukherjee. Despite being barred from any political elections until 2030, Bolsonaro still remains a huge political figure in Brazil. Do you think this trial might weaken his influence in Brazil, or do you think it might be used to rally his supporters and strengthen his movement, possibly?
I think the latter. I think he's rallying his supporters. He doesn't want to disappear off the map. Lula's been in power for almost 2 years now. Bolsonaro narrowly lost the elections, then went to America, at which time he was also accused of all sorts of things. He denied them. He is still battling. Lula is pretty elderly. Bolsonaro is much sturdier, and so he's hoping to outlive Lula and come back with his support base. If they jail him now, I don't think it'll stick for very long.
Professor Gunaratne, I wanted to kind of phrase the same kind of question to you. We obviously have seen this with other major political figures in the past. We've seen an insurrection attempt in the month of January. We've seen charges once he's lost the election, and we've seen political comebacks after this. Can we see this as something similar happening here with Bolsonaro in South America?
In South America, or for that reason in South and Central America, we have seen such allegations and such charges. In this case, there are two principal charges. One is that he tried to poison uh, Lula da Silva, and the second is, of course, that he want to shoot dead the Supreme Court judge, Alexandra de Moros. I personally believe that these charges are unsubstantiated. And it is very important for governments to be careful, for the criminal justice and prison systems to get involved in this kind of infighting, because it's not going to help any of those countries. And I think that it is vital for Latin American leaders to ensure that these personal disputes, political and personal disputes, are not taken to such a level, and that courts do not charge and prosecute simply because they are in the opposition.
Gautam Mukherjee, President Lula da Silva is receiving record disapproval ratings in Brazil. Obviously, Bolsonaro will be out of the race in 2026, but we will be able to run again, once again in 2030. But could we see maybe Bolsonaro maybe aligning himself with someone more conservative that matches his ideology? And could this trial lead to that candidate's success, maybe with Bolsonaro aligned alongside him in the future?
Yes, provided he survives till then. 2030 is still 5 years away, and Lula is very much aware that Bolsonaro is going for the jugular. Whether he'll let him being in charge of the government and with the armed forces backing him is a very big question mark. Bolsonaro is vulnerable right now, and I think if he wants to do something in 2030, his best bet would be to go into exile for the time being, to make sure there's no threat to his life.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Bolsonaro was a hugely divisive leader. You look at his handling of COVID. You look at some of his very, very conservative policies. There's clear polarization going on in Brazil right now, similar to what we see in America, etc. His critics claim that he is being unfairly targeted. How do you think this trial is affecting Brazil's already divided society? And do you think it could further radicalize the political discourse going on over there?
Polarization will continue. It will destabilize Brazil because both these leaders are popular. In fact, they are very close to each other in the last election. And I believe that in the larger interest of Brazil, they should not use such tactics to accuse and investigate and to prosecute their political opponents, because it will eventually damage the country, it will damage the citizens, it will divide the people. There will be no harmony in that great nation.
Gautam Mukherjee, even if Bolsonaro is convicted, could his movement survive and thrive under a new leader, perhaps? And what factors will determine the future of the far right in South America, do you think, in Brazil?
Well, I think if he is convicted, or if he thinks he's going to be convicted, he would probably leave the country so that he doesn't have to share power with a new leader, and he can still rally his supporters from outside. Because if he hands over leadership of his movement to someone else, that someone else will most likely replace him, and he'll be isolated and finished off either in jail or in exile. So it's not easy for him to do anything other than lead his supporters.
Rohan Gunaratne, we've obviously saw this with Donald Trump, a alleged insurrection and a former leader going through the court system in a country. Are we going to expect to see a bit more of this kind of these kind of actions from these leaders. Is denying the results of elections becoming more common?
Absolutely. You can see a global trend. Before, leaders always campaigned for unity, for harmony, to bring people together. Today, people spread disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy theories, divide populations, and then come to power. So this has become the new trend, especially because of the prevalence of social media, the domination. And here we are seeing a classic such case, first in the United States and now in Brazil, and it will repeat again and again.
And Gautam Mukherjee, what do you have to say about this? Obviously, it's very obvious that misinformation, social media had a huge part in this. I mean, if you watch these videos of this 2022 insurrection, I mean, they have pretty much swapped MAGA hats for yellow Brazilian shirts, which is signature with Bolsonaro. What can you tell me about this? And do you think that established leaders in established democracies can just deny the result of an election now and move forward with that, and then once again earn re-election once again and still maintain popularity?
Well, I wouldn't call it misinformation and disinformation so much as differing ideologies. You've got Lula on the left with a lot of what is now referred to as wokeism as part of his support base. Now, these people think in a certain way, and they're just as ruthless as anybody on the right in terms of maligning the other side, using whatever device comes to hand, from violence to the institutions, to the courts. This was also borne out by, if you like, the Biden administration vis-a-vis Trump when he was, not in power for the 4 years. There were multiple cases laid at his doorstep. There's a lot of court cases that implied that he was dishonest, that he was a fascist, that he was, anti-constitution, that he was a danger to the country, that he was an autocrat, and so on. And similar things are being said about Bolsonaro. So, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Neither side is exactly Snow White. You've got, one side happens to be in power. In Brazil, it is the left which is in power at present. And in America, it is now the right that has once again come back to power and is asserting itself very boldly.
Thank you very much, Gautam Mukherjee and Rohan Gunaratne, for joining us in that discussion. We will move on to some more news updates. Now, let's take a look at some news updates from the world of business. US private equity firm KKR has secured a 57.92% stake in Fujisoft in a fierce battle with rival Bain Capital to take the Japanese software developer private. Both KKR and Bain have had upped their bids multiple times, with KKR ultimately prevailing with its offer. Fujisoft's board supported KKR over Bain, prompting Bain to make a hostile bid in December and ramp up its criticism of the board, citing strong concerns and distrust over its handling of the privatization process. Mercedes-Benz plans to increase profits in its car division to more than 10% or more, a 40.5% drop in earnings for 2024. The company aims to cut production costs by 10% by 2027 and launch new models to boost sales. However, it expects lower returns of 6% to 8% in 2025 and fewer car sales than the 1.98 million sold in 2024. CEO Ola Kelly-Yunis said the company is taking steps to become more efficient and competitive. Renault reported a record operating profit of 4.3 billion euros in 2024, beating expectations thanks to lower costs and new car launches. Revenue rose 4.7% to 56.2 billion euros, driven by popular and electric hybrid models. The company met its 2024 profit margin of 7.6%, but lowered its 2025 forecast to at least 7% due to stricter European carbon emission rules. Renault plans to offer discounts on electric cars and raise petrol car prices to meet targets. iPhone supplier Murata Manufacturing plans to invest over $665 million in acquisitions to drive growth, focusing on inductors, sensors, and overseas markets. The company aims to scale up significantly within 3 years and has set a strategic investment target of 220 billion yen by March 2028. Murata also plans to expand factory capacity in Japan and Thailand and India. Dixon Technologies India expects to more than double its revenue this fiscal year, driven by India's booming electronics manufacturing sector. The company reported a 45% revenue growth in 2024, reaching $2 billion. It assembles smartphones for Google, Xiaomi, and Oppo, and is expanding into component manufacturing as India boosts incentives for local production. Lenovo reported a 20% rise in third quarter revenue to $18.8 billion, surpassing analyst expectations. Net profit reached $693 million as the global PC market showed modest recovery, with Lenovo maintaining its top position with a 24.5% market share. The company is expanding beyond PCs into AI-driven software, surfaces, and AI-capable computers, which are expected to make up 25% of shipments by 2025. South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol has appeared in court for the first hearing of his criminal trial on insurrection charges. Prosecutors say Yoon's short-lived martial law declaration was an attempt to seize power, while his lawyers argue it was meant to prevent political deadlock. The Constitutional Court is also reviewing his impeachment, with a decision looming on his removal. If convicted, Yoon faces life in prison or even the death penalty. Here is a full report.
South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol appeared in court for the first hearing of his criminal trial over insurrection charges, with his lawyers pushing for his release. Prosecutors accuse Yoon of leading an unprecedented insurrection by imposing martial law on December 3rd, a move that shocked the nation and led to widespread political turmoil. His decree sought to ban political and parliamentary activity while controlling the media, triggering the impeachment of the Prime Minister and the indictment of top military officials. Yoon's lawyers argued the investigation was conducted illegally and that he posed no risk of destroying evidence, while prosecutors urged swift proceedings due to the case's gravity. The Constitutional Court is separately reviewing Yoon's impeachment, with a final decision expected on whether he will be permanently removed or reinstated. If convicted, Yoon faces the possibility of life in prison or even the death penalty, making this one of South Korea's most significant political trials. Yoon claims his martial law declaration was only a warning against what he called a legislative dictatorship by the opposition, not an attempt to paralyze the country. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific. A Sri Lankan passenger train derailed on Thursday after crashing into a herd of elephants. This accident happened along the track near Harabana, killing 6 elephants but sparing the passengers. It is the worst wildlife accident in Sri Lanka so far, where elephants hold cultural importance. With increasing human-elephant conflicts, authorities in 2023 reported 150 human and 450 elephant fatalities, and are preparing electric fences and other barriers to curb such incidents. Hundreds of Chinese workers are being returned from Myanmar's online scam hubs as the authorities move to close down illegal operations. 600 Chinese nationals will be repatriated over the next 3 days through flights from Thailand. The workers, many of whom were trafficked and forced to operate internet scams, are likely to have uncertain futures when they arrive. Myanmar's junta has also promised to deport 10,000 people linked to these operations. A senior Japanese foreign ministry official called on Taliban delegates to representatives to respect and encourage an inclusive political process in Tokyo meeting on February the 18th. Japan's special representative for Afghanistan to Saladi Ando discussed major issues such as women's rights and pressing priorities. The Taliban officials are in Japan on an invitation from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, their first visit since August 2021. Japan has continued to communicate with the Taliban even though it does not have any formal diplomatic relations. North Korean state media criticizes the US for the AUKUS nuclear submarine agreement with Australia as a threat to regional peace. The Korean Central News Agency commentary issued a warning against the implications of nuclear alliances, citing both AUKUS and trilateral cooperation between South Korea and Japan. Australia recently paid its first $500 million installment into the deal, which involves the buyout of a nuclear-powered submarine with North Korea. Also criticized the military alliance between South Korea and Japan as the Asian NATO. People in Manila joined a local campaign selling mosquitoes for money to fight the surge in dengue cases. They were paid 1 peso for 5 mosquitoes. Despite reservations among health professionals regarding its success, the public response was high. Dengue cases in the Philippines have increased by 40% this year. Health officials highlight cleaning stagnant water to cut the disease's spread. US President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk featured in their first joint interview since the election. During the interview with Fox News, Trump praised Musk as his enforcer-in-chief. On the other hand, the White House clarified that Elon Musk is a senior advisor and not part of any government department. Here is a full report on the story.
Brazil's former conservative president Jair Bolsonaro has now accused the ruling party of an authoritarian regime, which is concocting accusations against him. This comes after he was charged with orchestrating a coup bid. The 5 charges against the accused include the crimes of coup d'état, the attempt to violently abolish the democratic rule of law, and armed criminal organization. If found guilty, Bolsonaro could face up to 40 years in prison. Various lawmakers have also responded to the charges, including Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who has talked about his faith in the judicial system.
Ora, se na hora que o juiz for julgar, chegar à conclusão que eles são culpados, eles terão que pagar pelo erro que cometeram.
Que não estamos aqui uma questão de disputa política, vingança, nosso opositor. Não. O que houve é muito sério. Tem a ver com democracia.
The charges are based on an 884-page police report accusing the 69-year-old of masterminding a plot to prevent President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from taking office after the 2022 elections. According to investigators, the alleged coup plan failed because Brazil's top military leaders did not support it. Bolsonaro is described in the indictment as the head of a criminal organization which attempted to prevent, in a coordinated manner, the result of the 2022 presidential elections from being fulfilled. According to prosecutors, the final attempt to stop Lula from taking power was an attack by Bolsonaro supporters on the presidential palace, Congress and Supreme Court in Brasilia on January 8, 2023. The plan, called Yellow and Green Dagger, was supposed to be implemented on December 15, 2022, but failed. In June 2023, Bolsonaro was also disqualified from running for office until 2030, after making unsubstantiated claims that the electoral system was unreliable. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now take a look at some news updates from across Europe. Nigeria's museum chief confirmed that the Netherlands will return 119 Benin bronzes looted by British troops in 1897, marking the largest reparation of these artifacts. The treasures held by the Dutch Wildermuis for decades include figurines, tusks, and sculptures of Benin rulers. Dutch officials said the move helped redress historical injustices, following Germany's 2022 return of over 20 bronzes. Germany's conservative frontrunner Friedrich Merz called for a strong mandate to tackle immigration and economic issues, warning of a rise in far-right populism. Merz stressed the need to curb migration and revitalise the economy to prevent the alternative for the German party from gaining more ground. At a pre-election meeting, Germany's Young Conservatives voiced strong support for CDU leader Friedrich Merz, praising his plans to tackle immigration and revitalise the economy. Many Generation Z voters now show a shift towards the CDU and even the far-right AfD, as issues like migration and economic instabilities take centre stage. Experts suggest social media, including TikTok, has influenced this shift, with the AfD making strong inroads among younger voters. Google has agreed to pay €326 million to settle a tax dispute with Italian authorities over unpaid taxes for the years 2015 to 2019. The company was investigated for failing to declare income from advertising sales, but the payment, which covers taxes, fines and interest, resolves the issue. Milan's chief prosecutor confirmed that the case will be dismissed following the agreement. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen announced that Denmark will allocate an international 50 billion kroner for defense over the next 2 years, citing an increasing threat from Russia. She urged rapid military purchases, warning that Russia is outproducing NATO in ammunition. Frederiksen stressed that Russia's ambitions extend beyond Ukraine and cautioned against a premature ceasefire. The boost raises Denmark's defense spending to 3% of GDP, its highest level in over 50 years. And this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.